Okay, let's go ahead and unpack this relationship between science and society. It's pretty complex.
It really is. We often have this image of science, don't we? Sort of
Yeah.
pure, objective, separate from everyday life.
Exactly, like it's in this sterile lab somewhere. But when you actually look at how science gets done, well, it's a different picture.
Totally. Because scientific work itself is actually built on certain values, things like impartiality, neutrality,
Right.
autonomy, accountability.
Right. And these aren't just like philosophical concepts. They really shape what research happens, how we understand the results. It has real-world impact.
Definitely.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together some different viewpoints. We're looking at philosophy, some social commentary, a bit of history too.
Yeah, trying to get a rounded view.
Our mission really is to help you get a clearer sense of all the factors, sometimes hidden factors, that shape science and, what it means for society. We want to cut through some of the noise.
Okay, so where do we start? Maybe with those core values. Impartiality, for instance.
Yeah. Good idea. That's often held up as the gold standard, isn't it? The idea that scientists should be unbiased, just follow the evidence wherever it leads, no personal beliefs involved.
That's the ideal, yeah. Let the data speak. But then you bump right into neutrality. Can science actually be totally value-free while it's chasing those impartial facts?
That's a big question.
It is. And it makes you think about, well, how we even describe the world. Thinkers like A.J. Ayer talked about this. How even factual statements use symbols, right? Language.
Okay.
And the very act of choosing which symbols, which words, which questions to even ask, doesn't that potentially break in existing assumptions? Can you describe something without any perspective?
Yeah, that really gives you pause. It's like the lens you use changes the view.
Kind of. And then you've got autonomy.
Right, the idea that science should just follow its own internal logic, driven by curiosity, not outside agendas.
Exactly. But, let's be real. Where does the money come from?
Yes. Which leads straight to accountability, doesn't it?
It does. Who are scientists accountable to? Just other scientists. The pursuit of knowledge itself.
Or society. The taxpayers, the people potentially affected by the research.
Yeah.
And what are they accountable for? Just the methods? Or also how the discoveries might be used?
Big questions. Which I think leads us nicely into how research agendas actually get formed.
Yeah, because it's usually not just a scientist thinking, I wonder about X in a vacuum.
Not often, no. External factors are huge. Take funding sources, that's a massive one.
Definitely. Government grants, private foundations, corporations,
Yeah.
they all have priorities, right?
Absolutely. And those priorities inevitably steer research towards certain areas. Things that look profitable or maybe align with political goals, they're just more likely to get the cash.
And it's not just money, is it?
Yeah.
Military goals have played a huge part historically and still do.
Oh, massively. Think about something like radar technology back in World War II. That was pushed forward at incredible speed because of military need.
A classic example.
And the thing is, while that kind of funding can really accelerate certain fields, it might also mean other, perhaps equally important areas get ignored because they don't have that immediate strategic use.
It creates a kind of path dependency.
Sort of, yeah. And then there's this whole tricky area of ownership, especially with something like, say, genetic data.
Oof, yeah. That's a minefield. Who owns your genetic information? You. The lab that sequences it. A company analyzing it.
Exactly. And that immediately raises social questions. Who benefits? Who might be left behind or even harmed?
If a company patents a gene sequence related to a disease,
Yeah.
what does that mean for testing? For treatments, access?
These aren't abstract issues. They have real consequences for people's lives and health.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly.
Yeah.
Talk about big science, the stuff that emerged really after World War II.
Right, things like the Human Genome Project or the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. Huge scale, huge collaborations, often international.
What's really interesting there, I think, is this tension between openness and secrecy.
That's a core tension, absolutely. On the one hand, these massive projects almost require openness. You need collaboration, data sharing on a vast scale just to make them work. The ideal is open access. It speeds everything up.
That's the scientific ideal, sharing knowledge.
Yet then you have the pressures for secrecy. Sometimes it's national security, right? Certain technologies maybe shouldn't be shared freely.
Understandable in some contexts.
And then there's intellectual property. Protecting discoveries, patents, the potential for commercial gain, that pushes towards keeping things under wraps, at least for a while.
So you have this constant push and pull. How do you balance the common good of open science with these other, sometimes legitimate, interests in secrecy?
It's a tough balancing act, and the line isn't always clear.
This actually makes me think of Helen Longino's work. She talked about different kinds of values in science, constitutive and contextual. Can you break that down?
Sure. So Longino draws this distinction. Constitutive values are like the internal rules of the game for science, things scientists generally agree on.
Okay, like what?
Like your theories need to match the evidence, right? Empirical accuracy. They should be logically consistent. They should be able to explain things, predict things. These are the benchmarks used within science to judge research.
Got it. The internal standards. So what are contextual values?
Contextual values are the ones that come from outside science, from the society and culture it sits within. Social values, political ones, economic ones, ethical beliefs.
Ah, okay. The broader context.
Exactly. And Longino's point is that these contextual values inevitably seep into the scientific process. They can influence what questions get asked in the first place, how data gets interpreted, even which theories seem more plausible.
So even if scientists are trying really hard to stick to those internal constitutive values,
Yeah.
the wider world and its values are still shaping things.
Pretty much, yeah. They interact. Let's take an example, maybe research on a new pesticide.
Okay.
The constitutive value of accuracy demands really careful testing. Toxicity, environmental effects, all that. Rigorous data. But maybe there's strong economic pressure, a contextual value to get this pesticide approved quickly to boost crop yields. That pressure might subtly influence how much testing is seen as enough, or how ambiguous results are interpreted. See how they can interact.
Yeah, I do. The desire for profit or productivity could subtly shift the standard for what counts as safe enough based on the scientific data.
Precisely. It highlights that science isn't happening in a bubble. It's a human activity embedded in society.
Which brings us to maybe the deepest question here. Does science actually need moral commitments?
That's a huge one. Is the scientist's job just to find the facts, objectively, and that's it? Or is there more to it?
Is there a moral responsibility that comes with discovery?
Well, there are different views. One argument is that science should be value neutral. Just discover how the world works, period. Don't get involved in oughts, only is.
That feels difficult, doesn't it? Especially now, when you think about AI, genetic engineering, climate science.
Yeah.
The potential impacts are enormous.
Right. Can scientists really just wash their hands of how their work is used, say, not my department?
It seems like that's getting harder and harder to justify.
Yeah.
Which leads to the next question. If they do have responsibilities, what are they? What duties do scientists owe society?
That's the debate. Should they be transparent about risks and benefits? Should they engage more with the public, with policymakers? Help steer the ship, so to speak.
Help ensure science is used wisely.
Yeah. Help address big societal problems. It feels like there's a growing expectation, perhaps, that they should. We often look to history or philosophy for guidance on responsibility, don't we? How to use power and knowledge well.
These aren't entirely new questions, just playing out in a very high-stakes scientific context now.
Exactly. And different ethical ideas come into play, like this concept of responsible innovation, the idea that scientists should try and anticipate the consequences of their work right from the start. Build ethics in, not tack it on later.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given the power of modern science.
The potential for good is immense, but so are the risks. So these questions about morality, about duty, they feel incredibly relevant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The choices being made in labs and research institutions, guided by certain values, they ripple outwards and affect all of us.
Oh, sure.
So wrapping up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's clear this science-society relationship is, well, really complex and constantly evolving.
Definitely not simple. We've touched on the core values, impartiality, neutrality, and how they play out. We looked at how things like funding and other goals shape what gets researched.
Right, and that tension in big science between being open and being secret. Then Longino's ideas about internal scientific values versus those from the wider world.
And finally, that fundamental question about whether science needs a moral compass and what duties scientists might have.
Ultimately, science isn't this separate thing over there. It's woven right into society. It shapes us, and we shape it.
Couldn't agree more.
Which leaves us, and you, with maybe one final thought to chew on. Given everything we've talked about, all the influences, the values, the pressures, is the pursuit of pure, objective scientific truth even possible? Or does the very act of choosing what to study, how to study it, already bake in certain values?
It's something worth reflecting on. And we really encourage you to think about your own assumptions about science, its power, and its place in the world. Understanding these dynamics is, well, it's crucial for everyone.